Well, hey, everybody, Adam Davidson, RadCast for Wednesday, November 15th, 2023. How are you? We're going to jump right into it. The simple idea today is that God is wiser than me, and he's wiser than you as well. Let's talk about his wisdom. This is how it's revealed in Romans chapter 11. It looks like this. Paul writes, "Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God, how unsearchable his judgments and his paths beyond tracing out." And that is the word of the Lord. And I've highlighted the word wisdom. Wisdom is knowledge rightly applied. And what Paul is doing at the end of Romans 11 here is he's saying, listen, we got to understand just how massive God is and just how much we're dealing with here. We have no clue. We don't have the capacity to understand it any more than ants and beetles have the capacity to understand trigonometry. It's just something that's so beyond us. And yet God comes close to us in Jesus. And throughout the scriptures, there are all these little snippets that talk about the wisdom of God and how we as human beings deal with it. For example, Psalm 111, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All who follow his precepts have good understanding, and to him belongs eternal praise. So now the idea there is that for us to really even begin to comprehend God and his wisdom, we have to understand just how massive he is. And the larger he is in our scope and the more that we understand him and see him, the more we don't understand him, and the bigger and quite honestly scarier he is. This whole thing that we live in, this planet Earth, is only here because of his wisdom. Jeremiah 10 says this, "God made the earth by his power. He founded the world by his wisdom and stretched out the heavens by his understanding." So now we're starting to get this idea that God has the kind of wisdom that can just make an entire earth. Like there's no problem with him just sort of coming up with this thing called planet Earth. This is all in his mind that it's here today. This is the wisdom that we're dealing with. Now, all this wisdom should cause us to stand back for a second and say, wow, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe I'm not God, and maybe I shouldn't be trusted to be God in my own life. Well, here's the beauty of it. When you realize you are a fool, you are set up to receive wisdom. James puts it like this, "If any of you lacks wisdom," and that includes me, "you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you." In other words, if you realize what a fool you are and you realize how big God is, and you wish somehow that he could just tell you what to do and how to rightly live, he'll actually tell you if you ask him. But when you ask him, you have to realize the size and the complexity and the mystery of God. You have to say, I may not even understand the wisdom that I'm given. You ever have a teacher like that in school that is so good, and yet you at the moment you don't understand what they're saying, but then you kind of think about it more and more, and you're like, oh my goodness. I had a teacher like that in high school, Mr. LeBlanc. He taught modern novel. Brilliant teacher, super wise. He'd give you a little something to think about, and then the more you thought about it, the more brilliant you realize the guy is. God is like that times a million. So we'll land here. God is wise. We know that. We know that God is wise. But let me just say that God is wisest, which means that he's wiser than you think, all right? And most importantly, God offers wisdom. This is by his grace and by his mercy. That's a beautiful thing. So whatever you're doing today, you need wisdom. You need God-sized wisdom. So ask, and he will give it to you. That's RadCast.